at these fields and fields of beautiful flowers. Have this very specific memory, and thinking, because I have two main passions in life: music and being with children, young children. And so I was like, do I pursue a career in music? I grew up a lot in my teen years on Salt Spring Island, which is a very, very artistic community here. I'm living again here now, and just off the coast, on southern coast of BC. And so I grew up with a lot of musician friends and live music for dances in the community hall and that kind of thing. So it wasn't in school, but there was a lot of music influence during my teen years. But I will say that when I was then 20 on the train in Europe, I already had this real cynical idea that you can't make it as a musician. You got to be in the right place at the right time and have the luck on your side. And so then my other passion is being with children. And I was like, there's always going to be people that want to pay someone to look after their children in some level, in some way. So when I came home from Europe, I actually went into early childhood education at college and got my certificate for that, and have worked in childcare, the realm of childcare, in a lot of different ways over the years. And so I do both. I do music as a part-time profession and childcare. Sometimes it's been a more full-time profession, and sometimes not, but I do both. I haven't gone into further schooling for music. Basically, I had an adult friend that lives next door to where I lived when I was a young teenager, when I was 12, and I asked him to teach me how to play guitar. And he drew me out some chord charts and told me how to read them and said, now learn how to change between those 3 chords quickly and come back and I'll teach you a song. And so I learned how to do that, and he left, and I never saw him for like a decade. So I taught myself how to play guitar.
All right, so you have a passion for the music and children, and you're playing guitar, but then something in 1994 happens. What was that?
Yeah. In 1994, I got hit extremely hard with rheumatoid arthritis. I was 33 years old and a very strong, very independent young woman, a single mama to a 7-year-old. And then I was bedridden. And I was bedridden for the most part for a number of years, actually. And that was an intense time.
So you can't play the guitar.
I can no longer play the guitar.
You couldn't.
The rheumatoid arthritis, what it does is it destroys the cartilage in joints. And so my hands and wrists have been damaged, and I can no longer bend. Well, my wrists have maybe 1/4 of an inch bend in them, and my fingers, some of them don't bend at all. So I can't form chords and hold the guitar and stuff.
And it can it strike you at any age? I mean, it struck you at 33. It just doesn't seem like something that's such a young age.
That's the interesting thing about the word arthritis, is that people think of it as an old person's illness. And the problem there is that there are over 100 kinds of arthritis, various types of it. And rheumatoid is actually a systemic disease. And some of us are lobbying to have it called rheumatoid disease, because as soon as you say rheumatoid arthritis, people say, aren't you too young? And rheumatoid typically hits between 30 and 60 years old. But there's also a form of rheumatoid that is called juvenile rheumatoid, and it can hit as young as early childhood.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, and it's devastating. It's when I was first hospitalized after the first 3 years, I went into a hospital for rehabilitation, and there was one really intense nurse. There's always one. It seems. and I call her the battle axe. And I was in extreme state. Just to give you a picture of it, when they got me in there, they put a belt around my waist, which is called a transfer belt, and then 2 nurses, one on each handle of this belt, had to lift me and lift my weight, and then I'd swivel, and then I'd sit down in the wheelchair, and they'd wheel me down to the washroom down the hall, take me inside, then do the same thing and sit me down, just as a real explicit picture of how bad it was. And that's called a 2-person heavy transfer. So they were taking a lot of my weight. Like, I was just in extreme state. So, and this battle axe of a nurse, like, she had me in tears a number of times. I was in there for over 3 months, and at the very end of my stay, she actually was retiring. I guess she'd been a nurse for 35 years. Wow. And they had a retirement party. And the day she was leaving, she came in and stood by my bedside, and she actually reached out and touched my arm. And she said, "I just want to tell you, dear," like, first time she was really kind and gentle with me. "I just want to tell you, dear, when you came in, I was so sad for you because you were so young. And in all my 35 years of nursing, rheumatoid is the worst pain I've ever seen anyone in." And for me, the reason I'm sharing that is that for me, that was such a validating statement to hear. Because, you know, sometimes we think that we should be doing better than we are, no matter what it is we're doing, whether it's pursuing our career or raising our children or being a person out in the world. We think we should be doing better always, right? And I sometimes just thought I was being a complete wuss. And so to hear this real tough woman share that with me was a really deeply touching moment for me, and quite healing for me in a way, you know.
Giving you a little hope.
Yeah, well, realizing that that I was being strong, you know, that I wasn't over exaggerating things. Yeah. What
happens now with you musically? You know, you can't play guitar, but you still have the music in you. Are you thinking?
Yeah.
Are you even thinking about music at this point?
Right. Yeah. You know, music has never left me. In fact, it brought me through a lot of this. Like I said, I was bedridden for a lot of years. I've got a few little beautiful vignettes that I'll share with you. One was, I had a couple of friends who used to play for me, you know, when I'd get little performances, guitar player and a harmonica player, just a couple of buddies, you know, and they weren't fabulous musicians, but wow, like, they had huge hearts, and they were always there for me. And they came and they would sit at the foot of my bed when I was too weak to even sit up in my armchair and sing. And they came and they brought their chairs into the foot of the bed and said, "Okay, we're here, we're going to play, and you're going to sing because you need to." And so they sat there and played, and I just lay there and sang. And it was that, again, it was a very healing experience, you know. And I actually did keep performing through a lot of it. In fact, 10 days prior to that first 3.5 month hospitalization, I did a huge concert of all my original material at a local hall, and I didn't hire, they were friends I got 10 different friends to sit in with me on 2 sets of music, and everybody would do 2 or 3 songs with me, sometimes as a single accompanist, sometimes as 2 or 3 different people playing together for me. And we did this whole 2-hour show, and I called it 2 Hours Max. And for the parking signs that say 2 Hours Max. Okay. Yeah, that's where I got the idea. And what was devastating for me coming up to that concert was that there was 3 steps up to the stage, and I couldn't walk well enough. I couldn't go up any stairs at that point. Even getting over a threshold of a front door was difficult. So I was in a wheelchair when I went anywhere, and I did not want people to see me on stage in a wheelchair. For some reason, for me, that was devastating. But I'll also insert here that my maternal grandmother had rheumatoid before me, and she was in a wheelchair for the 16 years of my life that I knew her. And my debut album, the title track, Still Hold True, was written for her. And just knowing the pain that she lived through and still held true to her own self, which, anyway, I had a beautiful, wonderful GP doctor for many, many of those first years of the illness, and I talked to her about it. She talked to me about everything. She was fantastic. She used to come and do home visits for me. Yeah. And this is all, 25 years ago now when it started. Anyway, I was telling her about this, and this, I couldn't possibly go on stage with a wheelchair, and she just gave me what for. She's like, you go up there on that wheelchair and you just be proud, and nobody's going to even notice because they're just going to hear your voice. And so I had it all set up so that the stage, there was a divider so that they couldn't see me being carried up the stairs in the chair. And then a friend wheeled me out into the front of the stage and got me set up in front of the stage and stuff. And so that was 10 days before I went into that 3 months in the hospital. And I think part of that was I was just in such heavy denial that I was in as bad shape as I was in. Yeah. The nurses, when I first got to the hospital, were like, how have you been managing at home? And I did have home support. I had somebody coming in twice a day and making me breakfast and helping me bathe and get dressed and, leaving me with a lunch, and then somebody coming in and getting me dinner and getting me ready for bed and all that. But I just kind of, every day was its own day, and I kind of got through it. But anyway, so that's what I did musically. I just kept going. And the next time I was in the hospital 3 years later, I had been asked by a friend to play at his wedding and to put a dance band together. So then I got called by the hospital saying they had a bed for me. So I went, and then I came home for the weekend and did one rehearsal and played this wedding. So, the music just, it was like the golden carrot, it just kind of, I guess it kept me going to some degree, right?
Sounds like it.
And losing the ability to play guitar, I will say, has been devastating. It's been worse than when I pretty much lost the ability to walk. I had to relearn how to walk with a walker and everything.
Do you still use it today?
No, I can walk independently. Most people don't even know that I'm not well when they see me now. Although I've got something going on with my knees again at the moment, so people wonder if I have a sore back or something because I'm walking a little oddly. But most of the time, people have no idea that I live with this really debilitating disease, which is nice. For years, it was blatantly obvious because I had a walker or canes, or I needed help standing up from a chair.
Now, though, I think you mentioned to me when you reached out to me on Facebook that you were able to now play instruments on an iPad?
Yeah. So so this ties in with the rheumatoid again, which is kind of cool. I go in for infusions of medicine a few times a year. And I was in the infusion clinic, and so we're all sitting there with a drip, going in, and I'm in there for 6 or 7 hours. And sometimes people are chatty and want to interact, and other times people are just in their own little worlds. And anyway, there was a bunch of chatty women this one day, and we were all talking about dealing with the losses that we have to deal with this disease. And I was saying, for me, the biggest loss has been the loss of playing the guitar. And part of that is it was where I went when I needed to say